Hello, everyone, and welcome to our forum, Conversations by the River. I would firstly like to invite Auntie Rhonda Dixon Grosvenor to welcome us to this country. Auntie Rhonda is a Gadigal Bidjigal Yuin elder and traditional descendant from the Sydney, Warrane and Saltwater Basin and the south coast of New South Wales. Auntie Rhonda.
Warami Mujis Gadigal Bidjigal Nura Walamabemi Inyana Bayalawa Ngayana Elang Wudjuri Darabara Yanu. Welcome to country, Gadigal Bidjigal country. My name's Auntie Rhonda Dixon Grosvenor, and I'm a Gadigal Bidjigal Darug and Yuin elder from the Sydney Saltwater Basin, Western Sydney, and also of the Yuin people of the far coast of New South Wales. So I'd like to also acknowledge the elders past, present and future. So the welcome to country is done because it's letting the ancestors know that you're on traditional land, on our country. And it's also done to keep you safe while you're on country and on your return home. So I thank you for letting me do the welcome, having me to do the welcome of country. Welcome to country. Yanu, my brothers and sisters.
Mandangu, thank you very much for welcoming us to country. I'm a Wiradjuri woman sitting on Wongal clan land here, and like so many of us here today, I've brought myself here, not because you invited me, Aunt, but because I brought my own self here. So I say thank you for welcoming me, for keeping me safe. And I just wanted to express my intention to care for country and our beautiful river in the same way that I would care for my own country and my river out on Wiradjuri land on the other side of the mountains. Thanks for keeping me safe and thanks for welcoming all of us. Mandangu.
Thank you, Auntie Rhonda and Jennifer. My name is Vandana Ram. I'm the director of Bankstown Arts Centre. I'm speaking to you from Wongal country. I also live on the Cooks River, where I've had the great privilege to be here for the past 28 years. The Arts Centre, Bankstown Arts Centre, sits on Darug land, and I acknowledge the Darug people as the traditional custodians of the land on which we work and whose cultures and customs have long nurtured and continue to nurture this land, and whose deepening connection to culture and customs have cared for this country for over 60,000 years. I acknowledge elders past, present, and emerging for their immense spiritual connection to place, which was never ceded. It always was and always will be Aboriginal land. Today's panel is titled Conversations by the River, and I welcome all our audience online and the panelists who are joining us today. The original plan was to actually go down by the river, but given the challenging environment we've been in, we've ended up doing it online. And I think we're actually engaging with more people this way. We're streaming with Facebook Live, and we've got over 100 people who have registered, so it's fantastic. The Arts Centre has a very embedded art and ecology focus in its program and in its community engagement, always looking to ways in which we can connect with community on challenging environmental issues with a very artist-led approach. So we look at how artists can actually lead that way to think about how we create transformative change. The Cooks River connects people and places and multiple ecosystems. And today we're joined by a really amazing panel of local artists, elders, ecologists, and activists to discuss custodianship, civic and cultural responsibility for this resilient river. It allows us to reimagine, to look at new ways to understand our place in this world, and to actually take more personal responsibility, I think, for our actions. So the panel discussion is part of the current online exhibition. It's called A Week on the River, and it's now online with Bankstown Arts Centre, and it showcases the works of Claire Britton and Auntie Rhonda. Claire is very much a local artist. She lives across the river, and she's been very interested in attention, time, landscapes, and collaborative practice. She's worked together with writers, sound artists, choreographers, and video artists to create original projects consistently since 2000. Claire's work has also attracted awards for sculpture, performance, design, and research, and she's toured internationally as well as around Australia. Auntie Rhonda, whom we heard from just before, is a compassionate advocate in the fields of social and environmental justice and human rights, self-determination, decolonization, self-governance, community strengthening, and cultural revitalization for future generations. Jennifer Newman, who grew up in Narromine, New South Wales, comes from a long line of Wiradjuri and Australian yarn spinners. Jennifer lives on the Cooks River on the Wongal country, and she's also on our Canterbury Bankstown Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Advisory Committee, and has been a very strong advocate also on our cultural reference group. She's a lecturer at UTS in Aboriginal Studies and Adult Education. Peter Munro is a Cooks River person caring for country, a former president of the Cooks River Valley Association and a life member of the CRVA. He's been a mud crab since the inception of this remarkable group of activists caring for the Cooks River, and is one of the coordinators of the Mud Crabs, Cooks River Eco Volunteers. And Kieran Dunn is an ecologist and Aboriginal land care coordinator at Canterbury Bankstown Council. He comes from Gumbaynggirr, North Coast, New South Wales, heritage with experience in cultural heritage management with both forestry and national parks. His professional interests include soil and water health and promoting biodiversity. And then finally, there's somebody who needs absolutely no introduction, I'm sure. Costa Georgidis is a landscape architect and the Logie-winning host of Gardening Australia. He is an official Arts Centre ambassador, and he's been championing the ecology at the heart of Bankstown Arts Centre's contemporary arts programming and has participated in several programs for many years now. Costa has embraced our creative agenda. I think he understands truly that art has the inherent capacity to engage and activate. So over to Costa, who's actually going to facilitate this forum. Thank you.
Thank you, Vandana, and good afternoon, everybody. A big thank you to Auntie Rhonda for your wonderful welcome, and to Jennifer for continuing that welcome and continuing the story behind welcome at events. And I ask everyone to put into the chat where you are coming from, what country, what land are you on. The more we hear about these names, these titles, the more we can embed them into our day-to-day conversations and interactions. During Water Week, as Vandana said, the Arts Centre is a leading light when it comes to sharing environmental conversations. And today's Conversations by the River couldn't be more fitting in Water Week to take these conversations to the next level at a time when citizen science is being leaned on by people looking for truths, looking for local truth, looking for not fake news, but real information and real connection to the threads from the country and an understanding of the ecology that they're on. And this is really what Claire's project is about. And during this week, whether it's Water Week, whether it's this conversation, it's also Bird Count Week. All of these things are connected to country, and we don't have a Bird Week without water. We don't have citizen science projects if we're not connecting the country. And you know, these are just terms. These are more contemporary terms, but connecting the country was citizen science and has been and always will be. And any project like this that brings us together is a beautiful thing. So it gives me great pleasure to be able to hold this conversation and hear from our speakers. So I suppose let's start. Claire, you there?
Yeah. Hi, Costa. Hi. Oh no, I am unmuted.
Yeah. That's always a good start. We've been in mute land for a while over the last 18 months, and right from all forms, right from the top right down to community events, someone's there telling it as it is, and everyone's like. But look, Conversations by the River. Give us the lowdown. Tell us about where this came from and how you've come to this point in the project.
Yeah, well, I just want to say thank you so much to Vandana, to Jason, to Ani Rhonda, to Jenny, to everyone on the panel here today. And I want to continue that acknowledgement and thank Ani Rhonda for her welcome, and also for her friendship and collaboration, and for all the projects we have done together over the years. And I just want to say how much I appreciate your knowledge and how much I've learned from you, and how much I'm looking forward to hearing from everyone on this panel this afternoon. The study, the artworks that are included in the exhibition. I mean, Ani Rhonda has an amazing film in the exhibition, which if you haven't seen it, I would just recommend. It's only up until the 20th of November. It's about 15 minutes long, and it's just incredibly beautiful film of Ani Rhonda's walk. And I appreciate so much our collaboration and conversation, and also having that work included in the exhibition. And I suppose also thinking about water and Water Week. Astrida Naimanis also has some writing in the exhibition, and she wrote this amazing book called Bodies of Water. And in terms of, I suppose, I'm not a religious person, but thinking about kind of spirituality and thinking about connection, I feel that sense of thinking about water and the way that water moves around, and the way that water is in us, and the way that we're a part of it is something that really moves me. And I suppose that we've taken a sort of a literal avenue with that sort of sense of movement, and with Astrida and Ani Rhonda, and a lot of the people who are here today as well. You know, we in January we walked the water out of the river together, and Ani Rhonda's film is following her on that walk. And I suppose that you know, we get busy, and I live in a complicated urban life, and sometimes things get so fast that it's not possible to slow down and to take that time and to let these places change us and to let these places in. And the river has been, I know, so important, and there are some incredible advocates of the river who are on this panel today, and I just, yeah, can't wait to hear from everyone as we're talking. But I suppose my relationship to the river, you know, I grew up in Sydney, and I didn't think about it at all when I was a kid. And I've been living close to the river for about 14 years. And I suppose that, you know, I brought a curious young kid who's about 15 now up along the banks of that river. And I suppose when you're walking along a body of water like that with a curious kid, and you're being asked a lot of why questions, you know, why is it called that, and why can't I swim in it, and why, you know, and I suppose that there's been a kind of a conversation where that curiosity and that sense of just the beauty of that place, even after so much has happened to that river, you know, it's so complex, and the bed is so compromised, and the mouth of the river has been moved a kilometre to make way for Sydney International Airport, and it's called the Cooks, and it flows down to Botany Bay, and it's got you know, this kind of colonial history embedded in it. And I suppose that I've been taking the time for myself to slow down and to almost think about that place as, you know, it's almost like a kind of a meditation tool, that there's a sense of coming back and just walking along that river and paying attention to that place. And I think in lockdown and in Canterbury, Bankstown, LGA, that river has also been our perimeter. It's been as far as we can go. And, you know, I can't say that I'd thought that much about my local government area really prior to to the experience that we've all just had here in Sydney. But when it's as far as you can go, there's a new sort of sense of importance of access to healthy public spaces and healthy environment, and how important that is to be able to have that sort of simple beauty of following these bodies of water and looking after them. And I know that some of the people we're going to hear from this afternoon have, you know, dedicated their lives to looking after this river, and to that has just animated so much of the work of you know, Jennifer, Vandana, Pete, you know, everyone who's thinking here today. And I suppose that my engagement with it is sort of narrow in scope in some senses. Like, I just come out of a background working in performance, and you know, when you see a great performance, you leave that experience with knowledge that's in your body, knowledge that you have processed through a kind of empathic relationship. And I suppose when I came to research the river, I was interested, you know, not just in researching and reading about it, but also in just literally following it and literally spending time with it, and coming to know that body of water with my body. And so the photos and the video and the sculptures that are included in the exhibition, you know, alongside the film of Ani Ronda's and the writing from Estrida, and also some photos from a community group called the Mullets, who are, you know, heading out next weekend on the river to pull rubbish out in kayaks and canoes. And that these kind of community groups that are sort of focused on caring for that place are incredibly useful to connect with, because there are so many things at the moment that are hard to know where to start with and hard to know how to engage with, and the problems seem a little too big. But just taking a few bags of the rubbish away from the river is a little thing that's not that hard to do. And I suppose, yeah, I'm not sure that there's that much more I need to say at this point about that context. But yeah, thank you for all being here and for having me here, and I really appreciate it.
It's interesting what you said there. That point about just being with the river and that transformative act of paying attention, and I saw that point. Ani Ronda walks the river with child's eyes, with that awe in her eyes. And there was a point where she looked through the mangroves and just said, look at the light dancing, look at that, look at the shapes of the trunks. And I was watching it, but the way she saw it, I suddenly came through her eyes. And that's really what you're saying you did with walking along the river, just taking that time to be part of that space and be in the moment and playing with those whole things. Like Estrida said, you know, the river ends as the ocean. Where does the bank begin and the river start, or where does the river's bank end, and then the top of the bank and the land? You know, there's all these things that go through your mind. But you know, in terms of bringing all of our panel in, I think probably the easiest way is if you can each take 5 minutes and from your expertise with the river, tell us one thing you love and one thing you'd love to see change about the river in the context of your experiences and Claire's lens of this project. So, Kieran, would you like to start?
Thanks, Costa. Hello, everyone. My name's Kieran. I'm the Aboriginal Land Care Officer with the Cooks River Alliance. I'm an ecologist by background, and I've just come here to share a few of my perspectives with you all on river health and maybe a bit of soil health, but just taking Costa's lead. One thing I love about the river is it's still there. And one thing I want to see change is everyone's attitudes towards it, principally. My own belief is our responsibility for our environment starts with us as individuals. And what can we do to enhance biodiversity once we leave our back door or front door? So within that, there's lots of cultural perspectives we can take on board. I focus on the same but different elements with culture and the way we view landscapes. So my professional role is to facilitate discussion between Aboriginal and non-Aboriginal people, and let's find what's similar between us rather than looking at what's different. So, but happy to be here.
Fantastic. I think what you say about the fact that the river is still there, it will always be there. Water runs to the ocean. It will make its way through or around whatever we put there, and how you are interpreting it from the cultural perspectives, how Claire has interpreted it, how Auntie walked it. All of these things have these subsets and crossovers, and that's really where we're heading with this conversation. So thanks for adding to this setup, Kieran.
My pleasure, Costa. Good to meet you too.
Likewise. Jennifer, would you like to sort of give us a little bit of your experience about what you love and what you'd like to see the river evolve towards?
Thanks, Costa, and thanks everyone. I've been living by the river here for about 16 years now, and every day something else new comes to me, and my connection to country and connection to the river grows every day. I was interested, Claire, I've just picked up, Claire, you said that you think you've got a narrow scope in your work, but I wonder if it's actually more of an intense focus, and that's what I love about how your work reminds me to look carefully at all of the elements, to look below the water as well as on top of the water, to look beside the water. And that's what I see around the river today. One of the things that I love about living by the river here is that I always want to think about the river, not just as its flow, but also as its catchment. And I have been thinking about the way the water tumbles down over the streets and through the gardens and past your house and my house. And all of those flows come down to form the body of the river as it heads east. And the river, as you say, Costa, will always be here. And I think about other places in the city, like the hollow in the middle of Victoria Park there by Sydney University, where after a big rain event, that little creek almost bubbles back up to flow down there. And the western side of the hill in Hyde Park, you know, where the tank stream used to run. And after a big rain event, that water bubbles up and it's soggy underfoot there for a while. It reminds us that the water always goes where it wants to go. But it reminds me also about us as people, the way we all tumble down through the catchment. You know, big rain events or big world events that send people to Australia and then send people out through the communities, brings us tumbling down through the catchment. And then we all gather along the river. And as you say, Claire, we've seen that so much. And it's been such an important part of living through lockdown, living in our LGA of concern. It's been such an important part of our experience to come down through the catchment and become part of the flow of people backwards and forwards along the river. And so now, you know, I can look over the top of my screen here and see, I can probably see 8 people on the river path right now. And they're stopping just down there, and everyone's stopping to look up to see if they can see a baby in the tawny frogmouth's nest, because everyone's keeping an eye on the tawnies this week. And then they walk a little bit further east, and then everyone's ducking because that's where the noisy miners have got their nest, and they're all getting dive bombed for 5 seconds on the path, you know. And so people's connection to country and to the non-human residents of country just builds and grows every day. And so I love that we're all here on the river coming down through the catchment and into the flow of life, and that as we do that, we become connected to each other amongst humans, but also to the non-human residents of country. And so I hope through your work, Claire, and through the work of other artists who do beautiful creative acts and events along the river, that each of us who live along the river and visit the river and find the river nourishing our souls and exciting our eyes and our minds, I hope that we can gain some of your vision, Claire, and be able to think about looking below the surface of the water and on top of the surface of the water, to move in the way Aunty Rhonda walks along and looks at place and looks at country with her ancestors' eyes and with her future generations' eyes as well. The role of art in bringing us all to that realization is really wonderful. And that's my beautiful position on loving the river this afternoon.
Jennifer, you and Claire, tell me what you think. I mean, Jennifer's so poetic in her explanation of seeing the catchment, and I can hear through Jennifer's words that she's seeing patterns. And as an artist, you see patterns, the patterns of a catchment, the dendritic lines of water that start smaller and then slowly get big. And when you think of the delta of a river and all of those patterns there, how do you see that the patterns in Jennifer's explanation?
Oh, I appreciate Jenna's perspective and explanation and open-heartedness and connection so much. And I think, you know, hearing Jennifer speak, I feel like we all feel really held by that love of the place that I've heard communicated there, and just the generosity of her eye is really touching. And I've heard Jennifer acknowledge country before in Canterbury Bankstown and acknowledge how it's sort of embraced by the Georges and the Cooks River, and that area and thinking about the way that those rivers sort of embrace it is, you know, after hearing Jennifer sort of impart that image, it's something I think about a lot. And that sort of sense of the way that we're not separate from this place either. Yeah, it's we're very lucky, to be able to talk like this and think.
Yeah. Simeon King said here, and so perfectly put, agree, the river is only a river because of the catchment, and we need to look after the catchment area as we now do the waterway. It's all connected. Many people live in that space, as Jen was saying, but don't know or acknowledge it. And watching the water flow even down gutters to the river is a great way to read those patterns that you as an artist pick up on, and you know, that's really the perfect segue into Aunty, and to ask you, Aunty, like your goggles to the world, the way you see it, the patterns you see, the way you layer those patterns over the cultural knowledge that you carry. Tell us a little more about that, if you could, Aunty.
Oh, there's a lot going on in my mind and in my spirit. This artwork is Nadina, my daughter's artwork. So we, as saltwater and freshwater people, because the freshwater goes out into the oceans, and so the Cooks River and the Georges River are very important to us. As just this year, our people were given back their fishing license out at Lapa, and earlier on this year there was going to be a mullet festival presented by my cousin, you know, talking about the Cooks River and the connection to the mullet going out into the bay and that sort of thing. So my people were able to, the fishermen and that knowledge keepers were able to take 6 young fellas out and continue with that tradition, that cultural tradition. So that is very important to my people, this renewal of cultural activities and passing on that knowledge and the connection. My people are still doing the shell work out at Lapa. My grandmother was a shell collector, and I did share that as we were coming up into the sand area of the bay. I saw the little shells, because they're particular shells, only those type of shells that you can you can use for our shell work. And so my grandmother being a shell collector, that was an important job, you know, because you couldn't just get any shells. There had to be particular shells, and that you could do your work with. And so yeah, so you know, this is very important, the connection for us as traditional descendants. And I'm doing my master's in how to respectfully connect with Gadigal Bidjigal people on country and protocols at UTS. So I'm in my stage 3, and it's going to be a module, a teaching module that'll be taken up by UTS and hopefully other universities and organisations. And it's about the history of colonisation and the trauma that it had and still has on Aboriginal people and country. You know, all these catchments and all this stuff, that makes me sad, you know, when I hear that, you know, because our country was the first, and our people and the, you know, were the first to be to lose, you know, that sort of beauty of the natural flow of the creeks and the rivers and that sort of thing. So, you know, it does make me, it makes me angry and it makes me sad. And so we, you know, as traditional descendants, live in the city that is still our traditional land, you know. So this is all part of us looking into that and walking our land, walking our like my grandmother was in the boat sheds at Circular Quay, Jenny Locke, and she lived there, and she used to walk over through Centennial Park. And so that's all, many areas are our walking grounds, you know. So we're going to walk that as a family, and used to camp at Centennial Park and then walk out to La Perouse. Yet as traditional descendants, when we try to get jobs at the Botanic Gardens or Centennial Park or wherever, you know, 5 of us in my family went for jobs at Botanic Gardens, and they're talking about and planting our native plants. And other Aboriginal people who aren't traditional to this country, you know, as traditional people, we have a responsibility as custodians to protect the land, yet organisations are keeping us out. And that makes me sad too. So I do love that everyone's talking and they're sharing their love of country and the animals and the birds, and that's a wonderful thing, that the birds are still beautiful and around, and you know. But yeah, I just wanted to share that. That's my truth, and I just felt that it was important that I share that.
Thank you, Auntie. Just
Bless your arm.
Yeah, we had a question come in that I thought I'd just put your way before I head over to Peter, Auntie. Is there an Aboriginal name for the river?
Well, can I maybe cut in there, please, Costa?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, so this is one of the roles of the Cooks River Alliance, and it's currently something we're discussing and going through as we speak. So is there an answer to that? Yes, there is a name.
Yeah.
I would like to say, and I have been using this language name, and my people have. And when we done the walk, you'll see Gulyari there on the river. They showed themselves, and I was telling the little Koori kids there the language name. And so we renamed that. We reclaimed the Cooks River. It's Gulyari.
Gulyari.
Yeah. And we
And
have
that's-
been reclaiming and renaming different areas around Sydney. Like when we've been doing climate justice rallies and that, and we've done one in the Domain, which we reclaimed. And the language name, because our people used to have corroborees there, and my grandmother was put in an institution down there. And Dad, who was Chicka Dixon, who was a political activist, used to stand on the boxes and talk about the, politics and history of Aboriginal people. So it's always been a very important area down at the Domain area and that. So, and when we did that climate justice rally, we welcomed people to country and that sort of thing. And the Borroloola mob came, and that was lovely too, to support and talk about their country and the fracking and that. And so there was over 80,000 people there, and that was beautiful to see all the young people up front jumping up and down to all their lovely songs, their music and that, and see all the elders and the young people, mums and dads with their little children in their prams, and the union reps, wharfies coming standing up there with us with their flags. Dad was a wharfie and a union person, his father before him, and now my grandson's back on the wharfs. So we have that strong political background.
Yeah.
And it's very important now that we as traditional people stand up and Jabbergali, we say Jabbergali instead of Domain. So we're standing up and we're reclaiming our place names and our stories of connection and that sort of thing.
Yep. So these things are happening, and the more they take place, the more the ripples reach further and further across the state and the nation, which is fantastic, Auntie. Thank you for those insights that you've shared. We've got one more of our panel to bring on, Peter Munro, and then we'll go to some Q&A and open it up to everyone to answer the questions. But Peter, from your experience with the river, tell us a little bit about your perspective and what you've been involved with and how you're seeing change opportunities.
Thanks for the opportunity. I've been privileged enough to be a part of a huge group of people that are very committed to the Cooks River. And in talking about the Cooks River, I really acknowledge the previous people's comments that the river is the catchment. It's not the river. The river is just the representation of the catchment. And I think that's vital to always keep coming back to the catchment, and that it's that catchment and the water that connects us all together. We've done tremendous damage to the river over 200 odd years that Europeans have been here, and for that I always offer apology and acknowledge that personally I'm trying to do my bit, and a lot of other people are as well, to bring the river back to health. Andy Goldsworthy, the Scottish environmental sculptor, says rivers are pathways that take you into the heart of a place. And I think that's a really good analogy. Also, because if we look at the word heart, our heart is pretty sick. We've got a sick river that has had tremendous damage done to it over a relatively short period of time in terms of the traditional custodians of the river that managed it and cared for it for tens of thousands of years. And we've managed to do an enormous amount of damage in a very short time. But there are a lot of people that are very keen to work hard to try and restore the river to health. I've got a number of books that float around in my mind. Heather Goodall wrote a book called Rivers and Resilience, which is a history of the Georges River. And she talks about the resilience of the river, but also the resilience of the Aboriginal people who cared for and were custodians of the river over those thousands of years. Paul Irish has written that history of the Gadigal people hidden in plain view. And I think that's another important thing, that the Aboriginal people have always been here. They've always been the custodians of the land, and we've got a lot to learn from them. Ian Tyrrell's book called River Dreams, which is the history of the Cooks River, but I think it should be called River Nightmares. Of course, while it's been dreams, it's looked at all the things that people, when they started trying to do things they thought were positive to the river, finished up being damaging to the river. And I think Ian's book is really a history of things that have gone wrong with interventions, concreting trying to change that, as Claire mentioned earlier, changing the exit of the river at the Botany Bay for the airport, and concreting vast amounts of it and channelizing it all over the place. But that connection of people, everyone who lives, 500,000 people that live in the catchment, when they look out their front door, their gutter connects them to the Cooks River and connects us all together. And what we do in our house, in our place, in our very street connects us all together, and it determines whether the river is healthy or not healthy. And we have to keep broadening that out. The mud crabs are a tremendous group of people. We've got a whole range. We started off pulling rubbish out of the river and realised that was an endless job. And then, so we've now started doing a whole lot more other, more environmental things, I suppose, having booms put into the river, trying to educate people, naturalising the river. We've got 11 or 12 bush regeneration sites along the river that are very active, and we work on them every month. But the other one is People of the River, which is Grace Carskin's history of the Hawkesbury Nepean, which also has huge input into the resilience of the Aboriginal people in that vast river system. Rivers are vital things. We all need rivers. We can't live without them. We're all connected through them. Mud crabs, good on you guys. You're a tremendous bunch of people that show up week after week, year after year to do the hard crunch, the hard work, and they've done a great job along the river. So thank you to every one of them.
Thank you, Peter, and for all the work you're doing with the mud crabs. It begs the question. We've got some questions, so please, everybody, we want to take it open now for the whole panel to take questions from all of our visitors. So please use the Q&A and ask us some questions. They'll come through, and I'll put them to the panel. I just wanted to run one back your way, Kieran. What's one of the simplest ways people can get involved in things like Peter's doing? What's the best way for anyone to step up and say, hey, I'd like to get involved and help this process of change?
Look, I think the first place is asking yourself that question, Costa, and then look, it's all about resources. How much time do you have? That's probably the most important thing. Then beyond that, there's your own knowledge and enthusiasm. So, you've got to connect your enthusiasm with what's practical. You might live in an apartment, so it's not practical to necessarily get into broadacre agriculture. So, you've got to adopt and take a different lead. But I think it starts with the way we're thinking, and then the way we want to relate to different approaches, or the same but different approach, and then have a goal-orientated thing. So, looking at 1%ers perhaps. If you were to sow some seeds and you got some to germinate, that's a success, and that's something we can all take on board with our involvement in the natural world, I suppose. And but I think it starts with our attitudes and the way we think. And then with the way it's that think, say, do.
Claire, think, say, do. Can you walk with that a little? I really like that, Peter. And you're saying and doing a lot with this exhibition, Claire, but take that concept a little further for us.
Well, the thing that's kind of playing on my mind in terms of, considering thinking and saying and doing is, it's the river is such a complicated place, and the way that the colonial history plays out alongside that Indigenous history along the river makes it a really complicated, difficult, confronting place to talk about. And I just appreciate so much, I don't know, like Aunty Rhonda, you raising the complexity and the issues that you're navigating. I really appreciate you thinking and saying and doing that. And I appreciate just everyone kind of taking the time or to have the time alongside you all to sort of be thinking and saying things and trying to do things together and trying to figure out what kind of small contributions we can make that together will make our place a more honest and open and more reflective of our history, and a place that we can all be healthier and stronger together in the future. So I think that's what's playing on my mind in terms of thinking and saying and doing, just sort of acknowledging that some of these conversations are hard to have, and that I really appreciate it.
Yeah, it's and Kieran mentioned it too, and he's mentioned in a couple of comments that it's this incremental thing. Otherwise, the big overnight change, the big we have the answer, it's just a continuation of what's been going on for the last 2 centuries sort of thing. So there's that containment of overwhelm, but the importance of the little steps that open up the opportunity for the next layer of conversation.
Yeah. And I mean, I think in terms of putting forward a few propositions for the exhibition that were about trying to imagine that scale and trying to think about that scale and sort of get it into our bodies. One of the things I was thinking about was like, if you walk for about an hour, that's about 6,000 steps. And if we sort of think about every step being 10 years, 60,000 steps is like the whole hour. And the history in Australia that since colonisation is just the last 25 of those steps. So there's some kind of sense of the scale of history that we're talking about here that I'm trying to understand and think about too.
Yeah. Tim Carroll said here, sometimes the river can surprise enormously. 2 weeks ago saw literally hundreds of mullets swarming near the new bridge, made one's heart beat faster. These things and the dismantling of the concrete and opening up of these new sections, and I know only a little bit about this compared to what the mullets do, but Peter, what are your thoughts when you sort of see nature coming back with just a little bit of effort?
To me, it speaks of resilience. It doesn't need a lot. It needs, I think we've always, as humans, we've tried to control and tame the river, but I think we've got to acknowledge that the river's an entity in itself, and we've got to understand that and go with it. And I think we do learn that from the traditional owners, and I think that's the change that I've seen happen over the last 20 years that I've been involved in things along the river. Instead of trying to master things and there's just too many people. we're too many. We're in there. We want everything so we can walk through it. Then we need to have parts of the river closed off to let it be natural, to share it with all the other living things that are looking for space to live as well. And just jumping backwards, the little things we can do outside your own house, you can pick up things that are in the gutter that next time it rains will wash into the river and choke up the natural wildlife, etc. We've got a group called the Crab Walkers, and you do 6 houses outside your house. You go along and take everything out of the gutter, put it into a bag, and report back what you've done. And you do that all over the catchment, and you know suddenly you've got a lot less rubbish going into the river. But I diverted there, Costa. I'm sorry.
No, but these are those things that, you know, there's people out there involved in different processes. There's landscapers, there's gardeners, there's engineers, there's people whose actions day to day impact the river. Like someone mentioned here, wondering what the panelists think about the impact of sporting fields alongside the river with the use of pesticides and fertilisers that run off and pollute the river. Should the whole riparian zone be set aside as a nature reserve? And then you get into that space of perfect environmentalism or steps by steps. And if there's someone working in a particular field, your actions, as you mentioned, as Auntie mentioned, as every one of our panel have mentioned, it's all connected to the pattern of the catchment. So if you're a painter upriver, washing brushes in the gutter ends up in the river. All of these connected challenges, but they are the small things that affect the whole. And that question was from Justin. So does anyone have any thoughts on that side of it? Anyone want to take that question on the panel?
If I can just sort of jump in and say something, it's about taking ourselves to a different space, to perhaps a more philosophical space as well, to in thinking, in working out how we decide to do things or not, and to think about colonisation and how and to think differently about colonisation. Not that colonisation was a moment that happened in January of 1788. But to think about colonisation as a structure that got off those 11 ships and plonked itself down on country and spread out, and so it endures and is as resilient as the river itself. The colonisation, the structure got off the ship, and we're all in our colonial positions now. And if we can decolonise our thinking about relationships between traditional owners and present residents, between humans and non-humans, if we can think about undoing the assumptions, because not only are Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people colonised, but I've got to say whitefellas in Australia are colonised into those positions pretty fiercely too. And if we can think about dissolving those structures, then those relationships flow better. And so some small action, like no longer buying individual snack pack tiny teddies to put in the kids' lunch boxes, because those little envelopes are what flutter out of the garbage truck and end up down in the river. You know, a little tiny act like that is an act of conscious relationship to the bigger world that's decolonising your position and bringing you into a relationship to people and country and non-human residents in a really spectacular way, even though it seems like just, you know, choosing a different packet on the shelf at Woolies. It's actually, it contributes to the big system, the big connected system. And so that's something that I would throw in about decolonising our own sense of place and sense of connection. Colonisation got off the ship and set itself down, but we can all move to change that.
Can I add to that as well, Costa?
Sure.
I think the man that started the mud crab is a man called Chris Bartlett, who died a few years ago. Chris was a guy who, to quote the Nike thing, he just did it. He didn't proselytize or talk much. He went out and did it. And what happened? People saw him doing it, said, "What are you doing? Can we help?" And that started. Went from one person to now the 500 odd people that caring for the country of the Cooks River. And I think doing things is that's the important thing. Acting, doing something individually yourself that makes a difference.
Jennifer said an interesting thing. Colonisers were aware of rivers. They used the river. Modern people are not connected to the river in the same way. And the question was, how do we get people more engaged with the river to care more?
I think that comes from spending time thinking about what you're doing and doing what Claire and Aunty Rhonda did, you know, when to do something, not simply to walk by the river, but to walk the water out of the river. That's a really high level consciousness about what you're doing. And I suppose to create more events and more meetings and more gatherings on the river is one way of bringing everybody together to become connected, and to do those, to spend time thinking, I think, is really important. One thing that I think we lack a lot in the world is ceremony today, and so it's so rich and important and uplifting to start with the ceremony of Aunty Rhonda welcoming us to country. It was a very, for me, it's a very important ceremony, and personally, it's a very gratifying ceremony to be able to say thank you to Aunty Rhonda for that welcome, to be part of ceremony, to think about walking along the river as a ceremony of caring. To think about, you know, going with Peter and the mud crabs up to Wave Rock and planting and weeding. To think of that as ceremony, not just land care, it's not just bush care, but it's ceremony. And if we can just bring our thinking around a ceremony like that, then that engagement, I think, just grows naturally. It's such an important part of life.
Simeon King said here, interesting how much Sydneysiders glorify the beaches and the harbour and not the rivers, which are just as incredible. The almost hourly temporal changes to the river are the real magic. The tide, the sky, the plants, the noises, the birds and the animals. It's always changing and always feels alive. Auntie, that's how you see it. You see
absolutely.
changing.
It's all connected. In Aboriginal culture, everything's connected, and we need the bush plants, the native little, you know, flowers and the bush plants and the trees and that. Otherwise, the banks start falling in, and you know, all these things as brother would know, you know, and So, and ceremony is very, very important. I've been privileged to, you know, grow up with culture and the elders and the knowledge keepers. And now I'm 70 years old, so I've been privileged to be taught ceremony, and but I'm always looking to my elders, you know, doing the right thing by going to my elders and letting them know and talking with them, and you know, they'll say yes, you know, yes daughter or yes niece or whatever, that's good, or you can bring in this part of this ceremony or whatever, you know, because it's all different at different events, the way that you conduct that ceremony. So ceremony is very, very important. Uncle Max Dillamon and Harrison, senior lawman, Ewan lawman, has been mentoring me and my daughter Nadina Dixon, and of course all the other lawmen. And I've been a discovery ranger myself, you know. And grew up with on country, you know, like out at Larpin Wreck Bay and Wallaga Lake and that sort of thing. And I think it's really important because Uncle Max says, like he says, you can't learn culture in the buildings. You've got to be on country. So, and that's a beautiful thing. I'd really like to see the traditional descendants of Sydney area be included and valued. We have a lot of knowledge, and to work with other organisations, you know, and to be able to share and lead those projects and be valued. We've been pushed aside and pushed under the carpet for a long time. And I'd like to see, we're in the process of setting up Gadigal Bidjigal ICIP and setting up a traditional descendant committee, so that we can engage with other organisations, and that it's done through proper protocols, through cultural protocols. So, and it's very important that traditional descendants have the opportunity to work with organisations and also to share our knowledge of our culture and our history and our stories. So that's what I'd love to see. I love to see Peter Munro and with the mud crabs and the mullets and Brother Kieran doing his wonderful work, But I think it's the time now, and we are rising as traditional descendants. We are still here. We've always been here, and we've got different projects that we're working on with the Maritime Union and UTS, and so we are coming out, and we are saying we are here, and we want to engage and partner with people, with organisations. I only think that it's the way that we've got to go. We've got to move forward together, and we've got to heal country. We've got to do ceremonies and smoke the country and the people, and work together to renew country and culture.
I think, given that it's almost 10 minutes past 4, there is no better punctuation mark than your punctuation mark there, Auntie. That really summed it up and brought it all around. There's still a stream of wonderful comments coming in, and as Jason said, Lena said, full stop, Rhonda. Amazing, Auntie. Beautifully said, Auntie, from Tim. So many great comments here, so many wonderful references. People, thank you for putting these references in there of how to connect with the mud crabs and other groups. These are really valuable things. And as Kieran said, it is not about trying to get to the moon. It's let's get across the street. And then once we're across the street, let's walk along the river, and then once we get along a bit more. And don't underestimate what those steps mean, because with those steps, you're bringing everyone with it. And you summed that up beautifully, Auntie. So thank you for the wonderful comments. And I'd like to pass back, and well, before I go, thank you, Jennifer, thank you, Kieran, thank you, Peter, thank you, Auntie, and of course, thank you, Claire, for the wonderful project and the chance to bring these wonderful voices together to speak for the rivers and the catchments. It's been a wonderful opportunity to hear all of your thoughts and experiences. So Vandana, please take it away.
Just to finish up, thanks again to every single one of you, and especially Auntie Rhonda. I think she's just set the right framework for us to move forwards. At the end of the day, even Claire's exhibition came at this very challenging time that we're living and sort of coming out of. But at the end of the day, I think it speaks so much to where we are and what it means to have a river like this in our space, where we live in a very urban way, but so many people were actually coming down to the river at this time. And I think it's really, really timely that we act upon this and we take your offer and we actually work with you, because I think these ways in which we physically connect, come down to the river, walk it, have rituals, bring it on, I say, let's really make that real. And the art centers, they're really wanting to work very, very closely with all of you. I really appreciated every single person and your contribution today. Claire's exhibition is up until the 20th of November online. And essentially, again, her work allows us to walk the river, so you can actually listen to her, the little audio grabs. They're a way to navigate, to actually, take it in that physical way to the space. And the more we physically connect, the more strong this is going to be. So thanks, one and all. Thank you.